I'm Paul von Zielbauer, and this is Aging with Strength. Today's conversation is with Dr. Renee Young, founder of Young Naturopathic Center for Wellness in Los Gatos, California. If you could hire one expert to help you age with maximum strength and identify and solve weak points and problem areas, Dr. Young would be your first choice, I'm pretty sure. So let's get right to it. Dr. Renee Young, welcome to Aging with Strength.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Paul. I really appreciate it.
I'm excited to have you on, and I know every podcaster ever has said that to every guest they've ever had, but I'm actually truly, sincerely excited because we're going to talk about whether people need you or want you. We're going to talk about the sick care system as opposed to the healthcare system and how your practice applies to the latter. And we're going to talk about tests that people probably haven't heard of that are accessible to anyone. They cost money. They're not typically covered by insurance, but I want to get into them because I made a decision to pay for them. And boy, the results I got from the tests that you ordered for me that we discussed as a patient doctor yesterday blew me away in not necessarily good way. So I'm looking forward to talking with you about all that stuff.
Absolutely. These are some of my favorite topics, and I can't wait to get into it with you.
You're a naturopath by training. Could you tell people what that means?
Oh, absolutely. So, naturopathic doctors do 4 years of medical school postgraduately. We're trained very similar to a medical doctor in our first couple of years. Educationally, we're very well matched to medical doctors and osteopaths within our first couple of years. And then we do a little bit more what I call root cause medicine. We're trained to look at the reason why you have a problem and your physiology, as opposed to just the solution and how to treat it. We do have some formal drug training. Many of us, myself included, do prescribe some things that are on the pharmaceutical level. And then I think, naturopaths kind of vary. Some of us love herbs, some of us love nutrients, some of us love IVs. And you have those like me that love longevity medicine.
What do
So
you love?
longevity medicine, I do.
Okay.
Anything that promotes the healing of your body, I just am like such a fan. And I'm sure as we go through, you'll kind of feel like philosophically, I have attachment to therapies based on physiology. And I've really, I think it's such an awesome thing to be in the age group. For me personally, being 50, it's such a cool time for me to be in
Oh,
longevity
welcome to the
medicine,
club.
right? Thank you. So,
It all goes down from here.
no, not for me, not for me, Paul. I'm just getting started.
Why do people need someone like you, a naturopath? What's wrong with a really good primary care physician? It's probably through their employer health care. An MD. Why would they need someone with your expertises?
You want a strategist who's thinking about every aspect of your biology, every aspect of how you live, how you eat, how your emotions are. Naturopathic doctors simply have the time that your primary care doctor doesn't have to sit with you, talk about your problems, and then think about not just the issues you have, what issues could come up that you're not even thinking about.
Wh- wh-
So
Wait a minute. Why do you have the time? You just have fewer
I
patients?
was, well, no, because you pay for it. That's really what it comes down to.
Okay.
So the system of medicine most naturopaths work in are cash-based systems. I've often said to my patients, if you want an expert to pay attention to you and only you, and not be thinking about an institution that drives where the economy of what I do goes, then you need to hire an expert. I am the yes, we can doctor. I'm the one that says if you want to know whether or not you have early osteoporosis or osteopenia, I'm going to order the DEXA scan for you so you can see what your bone health is like. I'm going to say yes to you and work collaboratively. So there are many people that need me from the perspective of there really isn't the ability to fulfill that type of relationship in a mainstream system. But one of the questions in my mind is always, what will this person likely meet their demise from? So when I think about cardiology and heart health, that's what will kill most of us, is having a complication of cardiovascular disease. Second to cancer. And then like right past there's diabetes that sneaks back to your first cause or metabolic syndrome. So we end up with, again, issues with cardiology. And then changes in our brain, neurodegenerative changes causing health complications. And when I meet a person, I don't just think about, maybe your body aches right now. Maybe you've had a chronic something going on. I want to fix those things, but I want to think, what will that ultimately cause that will affect your quality and quantity of life? I don't know that that's just naturopathic specific. I think they're just doctors like me that are curious and think about that. Like, how
Okay,
will this go?
what do you see that you think other doctors miss when you come across someone like me who's, generally healthy, but also got some markers that indicators that maybe we need to correct certain things?
So we have a fairly standard play in our office of what we call an executive wellness check. Executive wellness is what are all the biomarkers that would be available to a primary care doctor who could order these things for you. So we order that and we do I'm just like a really beefed up version of what your primary care doctor would do. But then we think about not just your blood chemistry as a disease state, we think about it as what about the functioning of your body? The current test I'm using is one called a NutrEval, and that one really focuses on your mitochondrial health. So, health at a cellular level. So, I think about it as the executive wellness is what's broken, and then the functional medicine test is what's going to break.
Hmm.
What could cause a problem? And what could also be an explanation of the reason why things look broken on your blood work, right? Like from more of a cellular level. So we look at both a current state of health and we look from a causative affair, like how did this actually happen to you from a
Hmm.
causative perspective? And I'll say layering the ELC, just talking to me as a professional or working with me as a professional are things like after we know that information, we want to look at polygenetic risk scores, genetic factors. And so each interaction we have will be a layering of more of the information from under the surface and kind of how that goes. The NutrEval test is about $450 if your insurance does not cover it. Some people's insurance, when they put it through, will reimburse it, and it could be as cheap as $179 for some patients. So depending on that, you can order a test like that with a person like myself and just talk about the functioning of your body. And it doesn't have to be this big, endeavor. And considering that I have a very robust, vertically integrated longevity clinic that does therapies as well,
Hmm.
most of what I love is that kind of what are we going to do with this information if your cellular stuff isn't looking good?
We went through my NutrEval results yesterday. So, what were the two or three things, and this is as using as an example that people can see, what I get if I did it. Like, what do you remember about my results, Renee, that were striking to you?
The NutrEval as a test shows me nutrient deficiencies in conjunction with fatty acid deficiencies, amino acid demand, and it also looks at some environmental toxins like stearine from plastic, MTBE from gasoline. It looks at mercury, lead, arsenic, and cadmium because those are kind of the 6 environmental toxins that we see often. So we had noted that your stearine was through the roof.
Yeah.
And that's from plastic. So I kind of wonder in a case like yours, is it that you're being exposed to that or, somewhere between some of your other executive wellness labs and this lab, is your liver potentially not clearing the stearine because you're a combination of deficient in nutrients like alpha lipoic acid and glutathione, which they were the 2 that I directed you to that I felt were problematic. So if we amplify those, then will we see the stearine go down? So the question had kind of become, is the stearine a problem of consumption or inability to clear?
I want to just ask you this because people might think, well, Zielbauer, he probably eats a bunch of TV dinners and, plastic snacks and this and that. But you also told me that my other parts of that test show that I think you said, you don't eat like an American, Paul. So I'm eating a relatively healthy diet, lots of greens, lean proteins, vegetables, fruits, and yet these plastics are through the roof. So it's not just about my meals, like it's something else.
I always laugh a little bit. I always say, as a Gen Xer, we were like the original no shits generation. We were like, we don't care. We'll try it. Got drugs in your purse? Sure, why not? Do this.
Right.
So the question becomes, how much of this is just legacy junk from, childhood and other things? And I can't really answer that. I mean, in plastic, I think of that as being a more immediate thing that
Yeah.
you were likely exposed to. Your arachidonic acid, which is from red meat, was so low, and your EPA from fish, nuts, and seeds was so high that you would be more inclined to not have a very inflamed body. So any of the inflammation you're experiencing, we question whether or not that's from more of environmental exposure versus lack of your consumption of good things that would help you to not be inflamed.
That's why I was so interested in meeting with you as a patient, but also talking with you here for Aging with Strength, because I think a lot of people would just think, my lipid panel that I do in my annual checkup is fine, it's no big deal, and then you just move on with your life. The idea is that you may be leaving years of your life on the table. In other words, you may not live those extra years if you're not addressing things like you're finding in me, for example, like whether it's the plastics or other markers. So there's all these different ways that you can maximize your health that I don't feel like you can get through a primary care. Do you agree with that kind of thinking?
I do. And I'm going to say, I think that medicine has a marketing problem. Medicine is poorly marketed. We do not help individuals who want to live well. We only help sick people. There's sick care, and I'm not the first person to throw this word out.
Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
new. I think that we've been poorly marketed to. You should trust that if you are truly ill and something is wrong with you, your medical professional is very, very likely to find it. And I want to be really clear about that. If you're going to have a heart attack, a stroke, something, no, they're going to find it. Don't not go. But when your quality of life isn't great, which could lead to some quantity of life issues, that's your responsibility. And that is the way that we're currently set up. I mean, whether that's right or wrong, we could have other conversations about, but your doctor it's not their job to figure out every little thing that would help you to live well. In plenty of other places in the world, people don't live like we do. They pull together in communities and they help support you through different times. And the transitioning of middle age is not one we talk about a lot. And it is one that I hold very close to my heart.
A few months ago, you mentioned to me that what you do, I think, and I hope you don't mind me mentioning this, is that you set aside a certain amount of money per year for your health care. That
Absolutely.
isn't going to be covered by, what the insurance covers or by a copay, but it's a budget, you said, that you create just like you would for a budget to go on vacation or to buy furniture or food, like a regular monthly thing. So I wanted to ask you about whether that's something that you advocate people do if they have the means and the ability and the desire to put aside some money. And what does that get you?
Topics around people's finances can become really sensitive. The world is not always, easy to squeeze extra cash out of, expenses go up. But I think that you have to financially plan to be well. So, kind of just dovetailing around this philosophy of sick care system versus healthcare system. What you pay for is to be taken care of in the event of an emergency or if you fall ill. But if you want to take care of the rest of your body, you have to plan a certain amount of money. So I always urge people, look at your budget that you spend every year. You spend so much money on vacation, you spend so much money on extra things. And from a consumption standpoint, ask yourself how much healthcare you want to consume. So for me, I look at those top line items, and I'm gonna start with cancer because it's one that is very dear to my heart. My mom had breast cancer at 45. She's with me. She's amazing. I have a little claim to fame in that I found esophageal cancer in my dad using a blood test from a company, Gallery. It's a cancer screening test, and I found it. And his doctors, every time they see him, they're like, "Tony, you're so lucky. Your daughter saved your life. She found this before anyone else did," and he's in his mid 70s and he survived something he honestly shouldn't have survived.
Wow.
So I feel really, really strongly about this. So I personally, every other year, I do a full body MRI. And on the off year, I do a 3D mammogram, a blood test through this cancer screening company, and I'll sometimes do a Cologuard test as well. So for me, that budget is a little over $2,000 for the full body screening. The cancer screening test is like 800-ish. The mammogram, I have to do almost $400 out of pocket. So I'm $1,500 to $2,000 every other year for cancer screening. Now, this sounds morbid. For me, I'm either going to die of cancer or a brain aneurysm. Those are the things those are the boxes that get checked when I check all my things. So I spend a lot of money for cancer prevention. I'm very aware of how expensive it would be for me to have cancer at an early age. I'm self-employed, so I'm going to spend more money. I don't have an employer that will pay for my stuff. So I think you have to consider this stuff. Like, are you a sole proprietor who wouldn't be cared for very well? Do you not have disability insurance? And this is what I mean about your holistic kind of health stuff. My husband, however, he has a little more heart disease in his family. So for him, we are doing a test through a company called Clearly. It's an AI-driven CTA, calcium scores, or things we also do where you check the arteries of your heart. If you're supposed to have a 1/2-inch pipe and it's only 1/8 of an inch, we all know you're going to blow the pump. So that test is $1,500 out of pocket, but the calcium score is only 150. Start with the cheap test, work your way up. So each of these buckets of disease almost have a budget in and of themselves. So people who want to hit all the diseases and they have all the budget in the world, they're generally spending $10,000 to $15,000 a year out of pocket. The ones that don't have all the diseases in their family and don't need very much can spend as little as $2,500 a year. So the budget can be fairly varied. And I have people who just budget for one, I'll call it like mitochondrial check a year and their basic executive wellness check. And some people with their insurance, they're at about $500 for labs and then a visit with the doctor of their choice, whose hourly rate usually ranges from $400 to $750 an hour. So it's one of these things where you might look at it and go, okay, well, I can squeeze out $2,500 a year. And I'm going to choose to, instead of go, on this vacation, I'm going to go on that vacation. Instead of buying a brand new handbag, I'm going to get online and buy one used. Whatever it is that makes you happy, which really isn't for anyone to judge, but I just feel very strongly that we can't expect a system to take care of everyone in this way. So we have to find a way to develop personal responsibility. Yeah. I want to say, even with your own test. So when we look at things like steering in someone's body, and something I just want to harmonize, I said very clearly to you, until you see a test repeated 2 to 3 times to look at an actual pattern with someone, we're not looking at that and going with, Paul's going down, he's loaded with plastic. No, that's not what we're saying. It's an indicator marker. It is not a definitive diagnostic marker. And I know I was very clear with you of, this doesn't diagnose you with anything, but it makes me curious about what's going on with your thyroid and what's going on with your blood sugar, because none of that makes sense in an athletic man with 13% body fat, right?
Yeah.
It's really well. Indication, not diagnostic.
Use the word, you got curious about my results. And I think that's the word that matters, because you have the ability and the time. You saw something, it struck you as odd, and then you started thinking about your patient. And that's what I think me and other people like me want. We want a doctor who is going to look at stuff and just have the time and brain space to say, wait a minute, that doesn't really make sense. Let me investigate that on behalf of my patient, because that's what we're not getting from the medical system, the insurance system now. So that's what I appreciate about you very much. Speaking with you can be hard to keep up with, because you just know so much that people like me don't know. There's ApoB, there's mTOR, there's peptides, there's DEXA-scan, there's polygenic risk, whatever that is. There's a calcium blah-blah-blah test that you think I should take. There's the motherfucker gene test that you actually prescribed for me. That's my word for it, because it was like MTHR something. How should people keep up with all the acronyms, all the knowledge that is out there now because of AI, because of social media, good or bad, and all the people on YouTube trying to sell them a bunch of BS for $500? How should people and where should people go to stay educated and informed, but not BS'd?
You're almost asking me, how do people become an expert in something that, not only did I do over 10 years of school with and residency, I have seen over 15,000 patients in my 25 years. I have a massive database of layered information. And when I see something, it opens up for me. And I just kind of go, okay, these are the things I have to look at. This is what I have to do. You have to invest in someone to give you the advice that you're looking for in a forthright manner. You have to be smart enough to vet someone that has a medical education to sort you through it. And we're out there. I'm not the only person practicing like this. We are definitely out there. Think back to the disease that you think is going to get you. Most of us know somewhere in our heart what's the path in our family that's the path of most likely resistance that we'll meet. So instead of being transactional about your healthcare, be transformative. The same way you'd want a leader to be with you. Ask yourself hard questions. Be curious. Do I really eat very well? Have I exercised? What have I done? Okay, well, if it's cancer I think I'm going to have, try to search for things and use the words NIH behind them for National Institute of Health. Search for latest cancer research, NIH. Latest whatever it is, NIH. Maybe you get an article that's above your head, but if you cheat on the side, you hit a button that says conclusion, it goes all the way to the bottom, just tells you what you need to know. Just read that. So try to look at studies, try to look at authors that are legitimate. Your local drip bar or your esthetician who just decided that she's now the NAD specialist, they're probably going to feed you a line of shit because they've been fed a line of shit themselves and they're convinced it's true. There are 3 things I like to talk about with my patients that happen as we age that make the body feel a decline. So the first is loss of hormonal integrity for both men and women. So as our hormones decline and we think about people being like, oh wow, I work out and now my shoulder's killing me as an athlete, that never happened before. Why does that happen? Our hormones are steroids. Steroids reduce inflammation. Those same steroids help with the communication of your gut-brain axis. That's why I'm saying it's like yes, but. So loss of hormonal integrity starts to lead to the degradation of the body. Then if you were to use your internet browser and search for HbA1c on red blood cells, that's hemoglobin A1c, how much sugar we carry on our red blood cells. So loss of blood sugar control or glycemic control gets lost over time. Your body wants to store energy for emergencies. Aging feels urgent because of the amount of inflammation that we have in our bodies. Our hormones decline, we get a little more inflamed, your body's like, something must be wrong, I'm gonna store some fat, I'm gonna store some sugar, your blood sugar starts to go up, right? And that hemoglobin A1c on your red blood cell does something else. It reduces oxygenation in your body. So I always say loss of hormonal control, glycemic control, and oxygenation are the 3 things that start to age our tissue. So the more oxygen carrying capacity we have, which is why we check things like VO2 max and respiratory exchange ratio, which is something that we have in our clinic that we love starting out with clients to make sure we understand what the cellular metabolism of their cell is like. These are the things that start to happen in decline that then can lead to a gut-brain axis disconnection. So I think about the things that we can control as practitioners. We can help people with their hormones. We can help people with their blood sugar regulation. We can help people oxygenate, which results in better reduced inflammation, better cellular communication, and a better gut-brain axis. So there's just so many cool things in longevity medicine. I hope that was a helpful explanation.
No, it was. What would you recommend people who want to investigate their own healthcare do to start?
Absolutely. That's a really great question. So just kind of going back to some of those top things that get us, so to speak, I think that if you can, outside of your normal blood work of, looking at your cholesterol and your basic hormones, if you can get a sex hormone panel, that's a really great thing. For men, making sure that your testosterone hasn't declined, that your DHEA isn't low, your estrogen isn't too high, and for women, getting a full female hormone panel. Again, I'm really speaking to people in like the mid-4th to, mid-5th decade. If you're not clear as to whether or not your hormones have declined, that's a really good thing. If you're a little bit older, if you don't plan on starting hormone replacement therapy, sometimes doing the test to the point of what's the point if you don't plan on doing anything with it isn't as worth it, but I do think it's a good idea to take a look at those things. I also really advocate for a calcium score for patients. I feel like hearts and private parts go hand in hand, not just in, your bedroom and your body too. So you've got to look at your cardiac health and your hormones together. Once you've had a calcium score done, it's kind of not the tell all end all. Then most cardiologists will order another test for you. Sometimes practitioners like myself will order another test to see if you really have a problem. And then I would say, I think about sometimes the cancers that are more common in both, men and women. It's colon cancer, and then individually breast cancer, prostate cancer. So like those are kind of the three cancers you should make sure you're screening for. So as a man, getting your PSA measured, and if it elevates, looking at it. As a woman, keeping up on, regular breast screening for yourself, whether it's a 3D mammogram or, an MRI. Those are really great ways to screen for your breast health. And then making sure that you look at something again for your heart, like a, calcium score. So those are the different tests that we're gonna look at. Oh, and I'm sorry, I forgot also, Cologuard is a test where you can just literally swipe your poop and it'll tell you if you have the DNA of cancer.
Is there a next level? Like, where does the NutrEval that you advised that I take and that I did do, where does that fall? Is that the next, is like the tier 2 kind of elevated search?
If you want to then take it to the next level and look at a little bit more of your cellular health, there are tests available to you. There are tests available that look at polygenetic risk factors, which what that means is, given your genetic material, how likely are you to have a disease? And like I'll give an example of that. So my background is Mediterranean, so a lot of Mediterranean people suffer from thalassemia, right? So whereas a lot of people from, say, Sweden don't. So they look at genetic risk factors based on where your family is from. That's what a polygenetic risk score is. So that's an elevated level. A VO2 max test is an elevated level. I think that not the ones that are on your phone. You actually need to measure respiration of oxygen in and CO2 out. That's a next level thing to do. And then I would say some of the genetic factors for heart disease and stroke, those are really important factors in discovery for your health.
It feels like there's 5 pillars to healthy aging. And of course, there could be 100 pillars depending on how you define healthy aging, but there's like the big 5 seem to be, of course, exercise and strength training as you grow older, sleep, huge issue,
Absolutely.
nutrition, what you put into your body, the food, and then the environmental factors. And then, of course, the 5th one is sort of community and social engagement. Is that how you think about, generally speaking, the pillars of healthy aging? Maybe you don't even think about it in terms of pillars, but how do you react to those 5 that I mentioned?
I think that they're really a great way to look at it and frame things. And we see this a lot even in studies, that people who don't have community, like loneliness, can lead to disease state. You see it in humans, you see it in other species. And when you look at kind of the blue zones that have been touted as places where people live to be over 100, they all have community. Like community is a really big deal. They're kind to one another, which I think is so important. But I also think there's also having ritual around being well. And whether that ritual is, that twice a year you do your labs, once a year you do a weekend by yourself. So I think about it like, what do you do in a day? What do you do in a week? What do you do in a month? And what do you do in a year, right? So you asked me how I budget. In a year, I budget to do twice a year testing to make sure I take care of myself. In a month, I make sure that I do something that helps me physically, whether it's take a yoga class that I'm stretching, get a massage, whatever it is I can possibly do at least once a month, bathe in nature for a longer period of time. And then in a week, I make sure that I schedule 2 to 3 hours a week. Literally, it's in my schedule and it says not doing shit. Literally what it says. And I've respected that. And then in a day, I wake up most mornings and I go in my hot tub for 3 to 5 minutes and then I cold plunge. Literally almost every day. I make sure that I drink half my body weight in ounces of water every day. I make sure that I get 3 servings of vegetables every day. I make sure that I eat somewhere between 70 and 100 grams of protein because that's appropriate for me a day. So think about your life like that. What can I do in a day, a week, a month, a year? Schedule out your self-care, budget out what you can do, and all of your other, also like pillars will fall in line, like your basic health hygiene, and sleeping, such an important one. Sleeping and making sure you're well nourished and taking time for yourself.
Great. Love that. It's really a cold pool, not a hot, or a cold tub, and then not a hot tub, I guess, huh?
Yeah. Oh no, I have both. So one is 104, and
Oh,
the other one, my husband and I are arguing between keeping it between 48 and 56 degrees. I'm like, I need 56. He's like, I'm gonna go for 48. I'm like, can we just split the difference? So I really spend 3 minutes at 104, and then I plunge in for. It's supposed to be 3 minutes, but I'm kind of a wuss. I barely make a minute. So of cold plunging, but it really reduces your inflammation. It brings like all the blood to the surface of your body, and then it drives it back in. And like as we age, we realize that our tendons, our ligaments, our muscles don't heal as quickly, and a lot of which is because you don't get as much oxygenation. So bringing blood to the surface and driving it back in, that's really going to help with that.
huh.
And there are a lot of other effects of thermal changes in your body, like hot and cold. So yeah.
Wow, that's a great tip. Renee, are you a big fan of intermittent fasting or calorie restriction on the 24-hour or 72-hour span, or no?
Oh, I love this topic so much. It's one of my favorite topics. Okay, so somewhere between 45 and 65, I love intermittent fasting again. When we hit 65, it can vary depending on how well you've controlled your blood sugar, which I'll make a quick comment on in a second.
Mm-hmm.
That, like, I'll say, like, middle age, which, that's just what it is, that middle age time period, your body is going to start to adjust to not need as many calories, and intermittent fasting can be a really great way to do that. And human beings were meant to be a little uncomfortable. So not only do I intermittent fast, I seasonally change that a little bit with how many hours of light there are. So in the summer, my fasting time is probably closer to 10 hours because there's more light. And in the winter, I get closer to 6 to 7 hours because it's not light out for very long. So I follow both a circadian rhythm and an intermittent fasting with that. And then within the week, I have 2 days a week I do very low calories, Mondays and Thursdays because I'm busy. 2 days a week that I gorge myself like a lion, Wednesday and Saturday within my intermittent fasting period. And 3 days I go moderately because I don't think our body needs consistent amounts of fuel every single day. I think you need to do a little pulse in there. And then when you're over 65, if your blood sugar dips and goes down, I think blood sugar stability becomes more important again for you. So some people, not all people, some people do better with 100 to 300 calories every few hours to keep their blood sugar stable because their pancreas won't do it anymore. Their hormones aren't intact anymore. I always feel a little heartbroken when I see them intermittent fasting. A lot of times my patients who are on hormone replacement therapy, or who have exercised for a bigger period of time, they have an easier time with intermittent fasting even into their 70s and 80s. So just kind of looking at, I think you become a lot more individualized in the 6th and 7th decade from that perspective. So
Is there any credibility to the idea of a 72-hour fast? I was listening to one doctor on Instagram, probably not a good setup for a question, but um, who said that your body doesn't start clearing out all those zombie cells or getting those senescence process moving. It doesn't really start kicking in until like the 72-hour fasting period. Water only, no food. Is there anything to that?
72 hours of no food can be great for some people and extremely detrimental to someone's kidneys and heart health in someone else. So I think that blanketly advising people to only drink water, like if your electrolytes are thrown off and you have an underlying cardiovascular issue or kidney issue, you could really mess somebody up that way. Again, this is the reason why I like to test things like your VO2 max and look at your biological age, which is a scientifically recorded way of looking at aging in people. So if you're 20-ish% younger than you should be, your body's probably automatically doing those things already. So why don't you save extreme measures for when you need extreme results? If you look like you're aging at a faster rate, then maybe you're my patient that needs to fast a little bit longer, go in a cold plunge a little bit longer. Maybe you need to do things like, you want to do 20 to 40 hyperbaric sessions to try to boost up your stem cells. Maybe you want to try exosomes and other things. But on a day-to-day basis, asking people to do extreme things, the positivity and negativity of it is so independent that I would never blanketly get on TikTok and advise that everyone does that.
Interesting. So you're not a huge fan of these so-called fast mimicking diets, I take it.
No, I am. In your fourth and fifth decade, I like intermittent fasting, and I think that you can do a fasting like diet, but I like them a little bit better with things like bone broth for 72 hours. Sometimes you can do like a juice cleanse type thing. Not that can really increase your blood sugar, but 2 or 3 days of things like just celery juice. I do like those things, but just water with no electrolytes or anything at all, that can be really hard on someone.
Interesting. Okay. Renee, I want to thank you for your time and your expertise and your candor. This has been really interesting. So thank you for making time to talk with
Wonderful.
us.
And thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.